Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of this tutorial is to give you an example of how to begin your history mystery investigation. Now, together what we're going to do is we are going to investigate the navigation acts. On the screen what you see is the investigation summary, and in front of you in your classroom you should have a textbook, because that's the example we're going to use as our resource for filling out the investigation summary. So where we start is first to begin by putting in the item or topic. And in this case, all I need to do is write in the navigation X. Now, before I can begin generating my questions that I'm going to use, I actually need to find information in the textbook to get my mind going as to what exactly I'm going to look for. I do have help, though, from the investigation summary because I have these root words along the side of my investigation summary page. You've got who, then you have what, when, why, and how. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard the saying before that it takes money to make money. Well, the same applies to learning and knowledge. It takes knowledge to make knowledge. So you actually have to have some background knowledge or prior knowledge about a subject before you can really start building new knowledge about that topic. You need to have information in your brain to connect the new incoming information to in order to get it stick, in order to make you understand what really, in this case, the navigation acts are all about. So when we look at our textbook, I know it's an old, traditional type of source to be using for research, but it's durable, it's trustworthy, and it's dependable. Now, when we come to a textbook, there are different sections of it that you need to use. If you look at the beginning of a textbook, you usually encounter at first the table of contents. Now, the table of contents gives you a general overview of what's in the textbook itself, breaking it up into general sections or chapters, and giving you kind of an overview or a snapshot about what that chapter is all about or the section is about. But when you're looking up specific information, you want to be using a different part of the textbook. And you want to be going to the back of the textbook to the section called the index. So right now, let's go to the index. Now, you'll be able to recognize an index because the typeface is rather small and you see a lot of different items listed very close together. You might see names of people, events, places, policies, laws, etc., all listed with page numbers. That's how you can tell you're in the index. Another way to tell is often the section is labeled. In this case, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the label index. So as we look in the index, we're looking for the ends. An index is alphabetized. So what we want to do is flip to the ends, which begin on page R75. Now, what we're looking for are the navigation acts. So first you found your ends. Now you want to look for NA, and then NAV, and so on and so forth. As you scroll through yourself with your finger, no touch screen for this, you should find yourself arriving on page R76, right near the upper right-hand corner. And what you'll see are the navigation acts and two pages given to you. You have page 96 and page 127. Okay? Now, as a rule of thumb, when you're starting in the index and looking up a specific item, you should begin with the first page provided for you. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. When I'm looking things up in an index, if I see that there's a range of pages provided, then I tend to start there first. So, for example, if you look down to right below the navigation acts, Navy, U.S., and you see in the War of 1812, you see that range of pages from 315 to 360. Okay? If I saw something like that listed next to the navigation acts, I would start there first because that's where most of the information on the navigation acts would be. But since we don't have that here in the index, we're going to begin with page 96. So let's flip to page 96. When you get to page 96, fight that first instinct to begin reading. And for many of you, the instinct won't be there to begin reading, which is good, because what you want to do first is begin to skim that page to find where the navigation acts are actually presented. Now, a lot of times textbooks will use text features to bring out things of importance, and this is the case when it comes to the navigation acts. As you look down page 96, you quickly will see about a quarter of the way down, in bold and underlined, navigation acts. All right, so you know you're where you need to be according to what the index told you. But now you need to shift from skimming to scanning. And scanning is kind of taking in the general surroundings of where that specific topic was located. So what I do is I look at that paragraph where I see Navigation Acts, and I see New England won enormous profits from trade. They wanted to make sure that they received part of the profits, so they passed the Navigation Acts in 1651. And the Navigation Acts had four major parts to ensure that England made money off of trade. And I see the four parts listed 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, knowing what I see on my investigation summary sheet, I think I've struck gold. This area here in the textbook is going to provide me with possibly all that I need to know for my investigation summary, which is causing me to start having questions in my head. Now, with that, before I immediately jump to writing down notes, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to read the section that the Navigation Acts were part of. And I don't mean that I'm going back to the beginning of the chapter section. What I mean is I'm going back to the subsection that deals with the Navigation Acts. So I flip back to page 95. And on page 95, I see that section begins near the bottom of the page, and it's titled Atlantic Trade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this section all the way through to page 96, and what I'm thinking to myself are the basic questions a reporter or a historian asks themselves. Who's involved? What did it do? Why did it happen, or why was it created? When did it take place? How did it affect life, or how did people respond to it? So with those basic questions in mind, I begin reading. The Atlantic Trade. New England settlers engaged in three types of trade. First was the trade with other colonies. Second was the direct exchange of goods with Europe. The third type was the triangular trade. Triangular trade was the name given to a trading route with three stops. For example, a ship might leave New England with a cargo of rum and iron. In Africa, the captain would trade his cargo for slaves. Slaves then endured the horrible Middle Passage to the West Indies, where they were exchanged for sugar and molasses. Traders then took the sugar and molasses back to New England. There, colonists used the molasses to make rum, and the pattern started over. New England won enormous profits from trade. England wanted to make sure that it received part of those profits. So the English government began to pass the Navigation Acts in 1651. The Navigation Acts had four major provisions designed to ensure that England made money from its colonies trade. 1. All shipping had to be done in English ships or ships made in the English colonies. 2. Products such as tobacco, wood, and sugar could be sold only to England or its colonies. 3. European imports to the colonies had to pass through English ports. 4. English officials were to tax any colonial goods not shipped to England. But even after the passage of the Navigation Acts, England had trouble controlling colonial shipping. Merchants ignored the acts whenever possible. Smuggling, importing or exporting goods illegally, was common. England also had great difficulty preventing pirates like the legendary Blackbeard from interfering with colonial shipping. With that, I know that I've found some key information that I want to take notes on because it provided me with the basics about the Navigation Acts. So what I need to do is I need to look at my investigation summary page, and I need to look at my root words, the question words that are listed alongside the left margin. I begin with who. Now, there's not a lot of fancy question-making skills you need to put in play in order to create these questions to have a good, solid understanding of the background of any type of topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply just ask the question, which I know I have the answer to, who created the Navigation Acts? Now, I already have the root word, so I'm just going to put created the Navigation Acts. Now, for this tutorial, I'm going to write out all of the words, but remember, these are notes, so you do not have to write in complete sentences. You don't have to write in using complete full words either. You can abbreviate as you need to and use fragments. Now, I'm going to leave some space, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look back in my text and figure out who created the Navigation Acts. And right away, I know from that paragraph that actually has the Navigation Acts that it was the English government who created them. So using a hyphen to kind of keep things organized, I put down that the English government created the Navigation Acts. Now I don't need to put down created the Navigation Acts because I see my question right above. So to make sure that question stands out as a question, what I'm going to do using my Microsoft Word is go and highlight that part of the text. Now you could do this by just simply pulling out a highlighter from your pencil pouch and highlighting it. So I've got that the Navigation Acts were created by the English government. And now I'm going to pull in some of my background knowledge. Okay? If you have background knowledge that ties in with the notes that you're taking, please put it down. Use the knowledge that you know, because as I said, it takes knowledge to make knowledge. So from previous research, maybe my 6th grade studies, I remember that the English government is made up of a king and what's known as Parliament, which is basically equal to the United States Congress. They're responsible for making laws. So the king and Parliament work together. Now, in terms of who, I don't have anything else that I need to put down. So I'm going to now move on to what. And my question is going to be, what did the Navigation Acts do? I'm going to leave some space. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take down what it says the provisions were. It said there were 4 provisions, or 4 parts. So you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? So all you need to do is write those down, and you're ready to move on to when. Alright, so I have my 4 parts of the Navigation Act down. You'll notice when you read through them that I did a little paraphrasing, took some things out, and kind of put my own spin on some of them. But in general, when I look back over what I just wrote down, it seems or appears, without much doubt, that England were passing these different acts because they wanted to make sure that their ships were shipping the goods, and the goods were pretty much going through their ports. The reason for that is they could then make sure that they were taxed, so they would get part of the money for selling those goods. Right? Moving on, we arrive at when next. Now the when question is going to tend to be standard for all of your investigation summaries, and it's going to be straightforward. When were they created? In this case, you have Navigation Acts, which is plural, so you need to say they instead of it. Now, when you come down here to put your actual notes about when they were created, you got to be careful, because if you look back on page 96, in the middle of that second paragraph near the top it says, so the English government began to pass the Navigation Acts in 1651. That means that they weren't all, each of these 4 parts, created possibly in the same year in 1651. They could have been passed in 1652, 1654. What we know, though, for a fact, is that they began to be issued or passed in 1651. So what we'll do is say something along the lines, began to be issued in 1651. So it's clear that they're going to be continuing after the year of 1651. Again, to make sure my notes are all uniform, I've got to go back up here and make sure my questions are highlighted. And, oops, having a little problem there. Sorry, folks. And then I'm ready to move on. Now, with this investigation summary tutorial, I've got 2 questions left, all right, or 2 boxes to fill left. So what I'm going to do to kind of help you out is I'm going to put down the questions that I'm going to ask or would ask, and then you're going to be responsible for finding the information for it, okay? So my question for why goes along with the reasoning leading up to the passage of these Navigation Acts. So what I'm going to ask is, why were they created? Right? And what I'm looking for with that question is, what did England want, or what events led up to them being passed? All right? So what was the reason for Parliament and the King of England to create them and force the colonies to make sure that they were shipping all the goods with English ships and putting taxes on goods that they weren't selling directly to England and any goods coming in that weren't from England? Finally, last but certainly not least, the how question is going to focus on the colonists themselves. What I want to know, which will help me understand how important this act was how did the colonists respond? So how did the colonists, and I'll actually put down 2 words and you can use them interchangeably, react, or how did the colonists respond to the Navigation Acts? With that, what I need you to do now is to, using the textbook, go on, fill in notes for Y and how for the navigation X, and then after that, you're ready to move on to another